you weren't here last night. So, I guess I always like to start with getting to know the people here a bit, just so I know how to tailor the day, you know, to make it what level, how we want to talk about things. I'm usually pretty basic anyway, but so if you don't mind, before we start, I'd just like to know, I mean, I met Lisa last night, and I know Lynn from before, some people, Charlotte and Philip, I've known. But it would be nice to introduce ourselves to each other, because, and let me know if, you probably don't know if you're planning to come tomorrow or not, but I think some people are just here for today. So I'd kind of like to know that too, because I'll try to make today a package deal. And so that just helps me, if you don't mind. I've seen you here before though, but I can't remember your name.
Adam. Yeah.
Adam, that's right.
He's like the third time.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't say the names, but definitely I remember the faces. I just don't come here often.
Adam's very quiet.
What?
He's very quiet.
But he's not really.
But he's slowly getting louder.
Yeah, I definitely remember the nice energy though.
Yeah.
Quiet too. And so Adam, you're fairly familiar with Dharma by now, then I would guess.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know what to say really. Hello everyone, lovely to be here. Yeah, it's just really great to see you again, and really open mind and keen to get on learning more about Mahamudra.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't really know what else to say.
Yeah. Well, are you coming tomorrow?
Yes, I'm definitely coming tomorrow.
Okay, because that helps me sort out, you know, what we're doing here. And okay, and anything particular interest in Buddhism, or all of it? Or?
Well, the Tibetan traditions, and I'm interested in learning, you know, as rich as variety of about different schools as possible. So still there's loads to learn. So
yeah, it's
unending. Many lifetimes to learn.
Yeah, it's just never ending.
Yeah, exactly. So.
I think that's one of the things interesting about Buddhism. You never get to the end of what you can learn about it.
Yeah, so it's great.
Yeah.
Kind of like the natural world.
And you live here in Leeds?
Yeah, I do live in Leeds. At the moment I'm studying in Sheffield, so
oh, so you can
just come up for this weekend.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, what do you do when you're not here?
So I'm studying.
School?
Yeah, I study landscape. I'm doing a masters in landscape architecture at the moment.
Oh, how wonderful!
Yeah, but my background's horticulture, so growing plants. Then I got too old to be outside in the rain all the time, so.
Yeah. Now you're going to be the designer.
Now I sit inside in front, drawing instead, which is.
Well, that's really nice. Yeah, but with having been in the field so long, you have a really good idea of what you want, which is ideal.
Yeah, and my main interest is making places for people, really communities from the bottom up approach, see what they want. And, tailor it to what people's needs are rather than going in and saying, this is my idea and your life will be better. You know what I mean? So it's a bit more difficult, but
definitely
more rewarding.
More rewarding, and definitely you end up with a better product as well, isn't it? Yeah. And Lynn, just so, who's new? Is anybody new here for the first time?
No, I used to come here.
Yeah.
Meeting you for the first time.
Yeah. Okay, because then it's nice if people say, hello, I'm Adam, or this is Lynn. Do you know Lynn already then?
No, we have met before.
We just
made a reception, didn't we? But
Yeah.
Well, then we'll just go around, because it's nice for everybody to, because it's a small enough group that it'll be more friendly atmosphere. Yeah. And so Lynn?
How do I describe myself? I have become increasingly interested in the Dharma over the last few years. I now volunteer here at Jamyang, and when I'm not involved in things to do with Jamyang, I'm a counsellor, and I also teach mindfulness, including mindful self-compassion. And I really enjoyed what you were saying last night, Paula, because you very neatly linked a lot of things together, in my opinion anyway. So.
Well, that's good. Anne said it, thought I said too much, but I was trying to get a lot
I didn't think so.
in, without it being too wordy, but I'm really glad you do mindful self-compassion. Are you going to do that here, or do you do that here?
I'm doing a course here at the moment, and we're in discussion with David. We're hoping to run another one after Christmas.
Yeah, no, it's really important. Yeah, great. We touched on that last night.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's just go around the back. And could I ask you two on the ends to come here,
Yeah,
so
sure.
I don't have these like
Sure.
in Charlotte's not just sitting in this island of space. And I doubt anybody else will be coming, so we could just get rid of those extra chairs, and it feels a bit more homey. Maybe the same, you know. Just, there's a blank chair there. Maybe just fill it. You guys all move over. It's just better feng shui, you know. No, I'm all right, thanks. I might want another one of these.
Oh, this is a good one.
I know, there's good ones and bad ones. And
Hi, I'm Cheryl. I've been interested in Dharma for quite a number of years. I suppose I've been coming down here for maybe 2 or 3 occasionally. I also I listen a lot to Joseph Goldstein.
okay.
I'm really into that. And on Thursday I'm going to Dharamshala to hear the Dalai Lama and Tenzin Palmo.
Oh, right. And where's that going to be?
In
Oh, you're going to
Dharamshala.
Dharamsala?
Yeah.
Tenzin Palmo will be there too, huh?
She's a Tashita, yeah.
Oh, she is.
Yeah, for 5 days giving a talk on
Oh.
patience, I think.
That's fantastic.
So I can do with that.
Yeah. I've always wanted to go see her place. She's doing amazing.
Yes, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not far from Dharamsala.
No,
I
it's
went there
quite near,
years ago.
quite near. I've done the
Yeah.
research. Yeah, both my sons have lived there they're not there now, but off and on for, they're both Buddhists,
Oh,
really.
wow.
And,
How fortunate for you.
yeah, and they've given me lots of things I need to do and lots of contacts. And, yes,
This is your first time in Dharamsala?
First time in Arizona. I was to have gone to Nepal 7 or 8 months ago, but I broke off my foot, and so that was called off. So now it's a bit difficult to negotiate Nepal and Dharamsala into 2 weeks.
No, that's too fast.
So I decided to go and hear the Dalai Lama and Tenzin Palmo.
Oh, especially there. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
So what else do I do? Well, I'm a retired teacher, but I actually do bereavement counselling at the hospice.
Oh, cool.
And I work for the Samaritans, and I also do fun things as well.
You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, fun is important. We get too serious sometimes.
Yeah.
with this stuff. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Cheryl, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And
My name is Amaya, and I'm not a Buddhist. I just here first time yesterday. I was looking for somewhere in line where it's going to tell me a little bit about meditation in a broad sense to help me with my, everyday sort of maybe take the things off in context at the end of a heavy working day when you are like about to explode. So it just happened to be here. It could have been in a Hindu temple or anywhere else. So it's just like the, learning how to meditate and calm down myself in general.
Okay, great. Well, I would start maybe by getting a pillow to put your feet on, so that you're warmer and more comfortable. And anybody else whose feet aren't quite touching the chair, or even if they are touching the ground, if you want to stay warm. Even you, Philip, are your feet cold?
Okay.
Okay, great. Just so long as you take care of your feet, because we're going to be trying to be aware of our bodies, and if we're cold or if we're stressed or something, it's not good. So what about you, Lynn? Do you need a pillow?
I'm going to put you on my blanket and tuck it under me.
Okay, so everybody's who's sitting in a chair is, and if you're sitting cross-legged, I really don't mind if you need to stretch out a leg from time to time. But, you know, I don't mind if you move. This isn't the kind of situation where you can't move. So, yeah. I mean, you know, not all the time, but before it's too painful. Yeah, and Dave. Wait, Amaya?
Amaya.
Amaya. Is that where, are you Spanish? What is that?
Yeah, I'm from the Basque Country.
Oh,
It is
cool.
Basque. I'm from Bilbao, but I live here.
I used to have a good friend from there. She passed away recently. She did a lot of work for the Buddhist centers in Spain. Yeah.
So, what else to say? I mean, I obviously related a lot to what you were talking about last night about Buddhism and ecology, because for about 14 years I was kind of doing a lot of environmental campaigning, and also there's a group that I ran called Schumacher North, which was a kind of eco-spiritual kind of thing. So it was bringing the two together. So it's kind of strange because about a year and a half ago, I finally dropped that work. But now they're calling on me to activate my, Jamyang Leeds to get up to speed ecologically. So it's kind of, it won't go away. It's they are. And actually, I was just the last few days thinking, even though more and more over the last few years, all my time and energy has been going more and more into Dharma, but I realise actually that more outward aspect of it is still, it's still really kind of close to my heart, and I'm maybe going to be looking at bringing them back together again in a more integrated way rather than they'd felt a little bit separate. So yeah, it's really nice to be kind of getting the input.
Yeah, it's
on that
definitely
you were giving.
something we need to think about because it's very important. I about 15 years ago, I wrote an article for Mandala magazine and never sent it to them, that reworked the Bodhisattva vows. And they had lots of environmental vows in them, because
maybe you
those
should send
vows
it
are
now.
very old.
Mm.
But things like, I will reduce my use of fossil fuels, and I will recycle my materials, and I will not buy new clothes, and or lessen my, just lots of things that we could do, because I think it's really sad to divorce those two things, because if we're talking about all sentient beings, how can we not incorporate that?
Sure.
And also just the whole idea of interdependent origination. We're all connected to everything else, so why wouldn't we feel connected to what's happening on the planet, and all the insects and animals, and not so much insects, but all the extinction that's going on, and just all the different. I mean, I know impermanence is a normal thing, but at the same time, I remember His Holiness the Dalai Lama was at an environmental conference in Vermont about, 25 years ago, and he said, I don't know what you make such a big deal about it. It's our home. We have to take care of it. And we're just not taking care of our home. And and Dharma is such an important aspect. I mean, what I kind of said last night is, I started out as an environmentalist and discovered at a very early age, as a teenager, I just realized the whole problem is greed. And if we didn't have so much greed and ignorance, then we wouldn't be in this problem at all. And also the whole thing of not knowing that everything's connected to everything else. So it seemed to me that Buddhism, especially a secular Buddhism, would be so helpful to create, because we all knew back in the 70s, at least a lot of us did, that it was time for a new paradigm shift in the way we think about the whole philosophy of capitalism and reductionist thinking and Descartes philosophy, and all that completely has to shift. And we talked about it a lot in the 70s. How are we going to do that? It seemed to me that Buddhism had everything that we needed if we could just take the Tibetan culture and all the cultural stuff out of it. And the other thing I thought was really important about it is there's no God. So then scientific people could relate to it, you know. It doesn't have to be a religious thing, you know, so it can go across the board. I mean, if you want to believe in God, that's fine, but, you know, and it just seemed like such a great blending. And then, of course, there was Gary Snyder, who was, I don't know if you know Gary Snyder, he was a poet, who was a very eco-activist, but a Zen Buddhist, and his poetry blended those together. But you might want to check out, there's an organization in the San Francisco area called Green Sangha,
Oh yeah.
and it's a Buddhist environmental group, and they incorporate all the Dharma groups. It's not just Tibetans, you know, it's like all across the board, because there's so many Buddhists in San Francisco area. And just see the kind of things that they do, because there's no reason why you couldn't have a Green Sangha branch of Jamyang Leeds that does things around Leeds, you know.
We have one in York actually. It's our little satellite group in York.
Yeah.
They got involved with inter-Buddhist thing, and they are now kind of in eco-dharma group.
Yeah, and I know Andy Wistrick is interested in Allison, and there's quite a few people that...
Yeah. There's an amazing book called Dharma Gaya. You ever come across that book? Edited by Hunt Bardener. That's got some fantastic stuff in it, and that's back from 25, 30 years
there
ago.
were a few books written about this kind of
That's a
the relationship between, you know, we talk about all sentient beings. Well, here we have all sentient beings, isn't it? You know? So, well, thank you for that, because I feel like it's really time to step up to the plate without that kind of activity, you know, because I think it's wonderful, and I've been very fortunate to spend a lot of time by myself. But Dharma practice, if you do take time to sit on the cushion, then what you do on the cushion really comes into play when you go out in the world. You know, that's the challenge, is to first learn something when you're sitting on your cushion, or change something, or do something, you know, have some transformation. But then how do you bring that, you know, then if you just get up and go be your ordinary self again, you know, you want to bring that change into your life. You know, so thank you. Well, good. That's great. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, I hope you have a lot of help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Environmentalism. I worked for almost 30 years for an oil company, but in my defence it was mostly in renewable energy, preaching to the definitely not converted, and but we managed to do some things and raise the credibility of renewables inside and outside of the company.
That's great.
Some did the best I could to promote the notion of carbon taxes and intelligent ways of using the system to do something a bit more wholesome. I'm well retired now. Charlotte and I have a small place in the country which we've tried to turn into something beautiful, and get some input from Adam sometime if see what our landscaping prowess has been. But we generate some of our own energy, all our space heating and some of the hot water and some of our electricity.
That's great.
And kid ourselves that we're making a positive contribution and try and keep off aeroplanes as much as possible. But, so Dharma, my mental obstacles were, some of them at least, were removed by Alan Wallace, and then Geshe Tashi stepped in and helped me to understand some of the Dharma. So that's, and now I act as Charlotte chauffeur. That's that.
Well, you know, I think working within the institutions is probably the best way to go, if you can. You know, because they're not going to change if someone inside them doesn't do it.
It's been very disappointing to see the rate of change. I told Charlotte this morning that I used to introduce a talk with a slide of planet Earth and a quote from a British physicist called Fred Hoyle, and I think it was a 1949 quote, and it was something like, as soon as a photograph of the Earth taken from the outside becomes available, an idea as powerful as any in history will be let loose.
Yeah.
And I would have thought that should have happened.
Yeah.
And it has happened for some people,
Some
but
people.
still only a minority, and
Yeah.
still not so many people of
Mhm.
influence. But hey, it'll come hopefully before we screw things up completely.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think it's just how people's brains are. They're just not a lot of people who can see past their own needs. You know, it's that whole thing, you know, as working in a company, we all know that long-term planning doesn't fit into our economic system at all.
You
know.
say this, I must contest it.
Yeah, okay.
In 1992, I sat down with a group and we said, okay, we've got a problem with global warming, we're an oil company. At the time, we were a coal company. I did
Yeah.
have to sell that too.
Mm.
But we decided, we looked at various economic mechanisms
Yeah.
to mitigate the warming,
Great.
how to do this efficiently. And we concluded that a certain kind of carbon tax was necessary. And we were then encouraged to go and speak publicly about it because it required an input from government. You
Yeah.
can't, but inside the company for what, a quarter of a century, they've had all their
that's
projects
wonderful.
assessed with a very high price of
Yeah.
carbon emissions,
Yeah.
and government didn't take this up. I don't really understand why, but we certainly did enough lobbying for it.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that. It is karma, isn't it?
Mhm.
You know, how do we shift karma? I mean, that's something we could think of. I mean, I know it's not the topic of the weekend, but how do we shift the karma, you know, group karma? You know, that's a very interesting thing because if we really understand karma, then we have to create the cause for that to change. And we kind of understand how to create our own personal karma to change, but how do you create the cause for a group karma to change? And I'm not sure if we can, you know, other than through larger educational efforts, you know.
I think you need enormous wisdom to do that.
Yeah,
I think it is possible,
yeah,
but it's a
Also,
very deep problem.
yeah.
Young people, this Thunberg phenomenon
Yeah.
is awakening a different consciousness
Yeah.
in younger people, and,
Yeah.
and maybe they cotton on and take up where
Yeah.
you left off.
Particularly because it's so much in our face. I mean, in the 70s when we were young people, it was more theoretical, this is going to happen. Now it is happening. And so I think people are more ready to, young people are really seeing that when I get to be my parents' age, things could be pretty bad, so we better do something now. So maybe it will happen, you know. I don't know, we'll see. It kind of feels like the government, there needs to be, all these old people need to retire, we need new politicians, a new breed of politicians, you know. But we'll see, because they are getting old, all those. You look in the Parliament and the Congress and US and different places, they're all pretty much old people. And the new people coming in have good ideas, so we'll see. You know, I still believe that, as Charlotte can attest from her work at Land of Joy, you know, pujas seem to work. You know, there's such a thing about, when we talk about creating group karma, I don't have any idea how that works, you know, if you have a scientific mind, you know. But humans, since millennia, have done rituals to create change, you know. And these Tibetan rituals, I can't tell you how or why, and I don't want to be superstitious, but it seems to be, when you do a certain puja, it brings these conditions together, you know, it just brings it together that you can receive the benefit, you know. So I think maybe more pujas might be one thing to do for the environment. You know, I mean, I know that was kind of, I knew I couldn't really be much of an activist, but I knew I could do little smaller things, you know, like chud retreats and things like that. And I think that it all adds up. You know, it all adds up. So, yeah, we'll see. Okay, I don't mind taking time to do this. It's all right. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Roxanne. I guess the Dharma found me at a very young age. I was 11 when I was taken to my first meditation class with
Mm.
adults, which I found really boring.
Mhm.
It's really boring.
It was, it still is.
And then when I was 21, I went to India and I went to Dharamsala. I went to Tushita Meditation Centre,
Cool.
and I was at a retreat with Venerable Ravina,
Mhm.
and I decided to take my vows, my vows after that. Practically speaking, I didn't really do much with Buddhism. You know, I'm nearly 40 now, for many years after that, because I guess with this particular tradition there is a lot of emphasis on book learning, words, rituals. And for me, even though I'd taken these vows, I thought, well, I'm going to live these vows, but all this kind of ritual and stuff, I don't understand it. I'm going to go explore some other stuff.
Mhm.
Anyway, in 2014, I believe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche came to
Mhm.
Leeds,
Mhm.
and they decided to renew my vows. I was like, well, you know, I do get this Buddhist philosophy, it resonates with me, I've explored other things, but I'm coming back to it.
Mm.
And as a result of renewing those vows in his presence, I think something changed at a deeper level with me. However, I'm very much for experiential learning, and I find myself now on a path as a healer, as a shaman, belonging to the Andean tradition
Oh,
of
cool.
Peru. So what you speak about, creating rituals for change,
Yeah.
I practice that, so
Yeah.
I see that. So,
Mm.
and that for me is like a big part of my life now in terms of committing to a role of service.
Mm.
So, yeah, this tradition I come back to because of the compassion and love
Mhm.
that I feel that, you know, is offered and available for people to explore. But the environment is a big factor for me, you know, how we're treating the earth and
Mm.
the relationship we have with nature is very, very important, I think, for humans to become
Mhm.
healed and to have that connection with each other.
Mm.
In terms of this practice, I'm not a really extensive meditator, but I find that if I start to have a regular practice, energetically, I start going at a rate that I don't have I don't know what's going on, basically. I know that I'm processing things very quickly, and I could go to bed and I'm basically getting electrical
Wow.
urge, you know, phenomena, processing past lives very quickly, and
Wow.
I just become scared, and
Yeah. So you have a really strong karmic connection then.
perhaps, yeah.
Well, that's what that means. Yeah.
So,
you need a teacher.
well, I do, and I think that I have a teacher.
Well, that's good.
Because of I don't
Yeah.
want to talk about it in this sort of open thing, but you know, there has been. I have a few teachers.
So that's great.
And they're from different traditions,
Yeah.
and they guide from afar,
Yeah.
and that's great. But I do feel like I'm also kind of. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but
Yeah. No, just be honest.
yeah, I'm just honestly,
Yeah.
I love this tradition. I love the fact that there's an emphasis on compassion, but all this mental stuff,
Yeah,
all this,
no.
but no.
Yeah, no, I
Let's
understand.
be in the heart.
Yeah.
And
Well, you might like this weekend then,
and
because I'm not much into that either.
great. And at last vow.
I usually do. I mean, I tried. You know, I mean, I did. I studied quite a bit, as much as I could, but then you get to the point where, and I think it's important to study some.
Yes, of course.
And you know, you might find a different. I mean, the Galupas are the most like that.
This is it, yeah.
And so you know, and it's not for everybody.
No.
But at the same time, just to have the basic understanding is important.
It is, yeah.
You know, but it's not the only way.
No.
You know?
There's another aspect to it as well, isn't it? There's another way to approach it. You don't have to kind of
Yeah.
go too heavy on the study. There's a lot of
Yeah.
other things in there.
And I think even within FPMT, it's gotten even more like that, you know, with the emphasis on
Yeah.
the basic program and the master's program.
I have a deep desire to do the practice, so I would, the last Mahamudra retreat that we did with Rabina, I would have loved that to have been 4 hours of just meditation
Yeah.
and silence. But at the same time, I would not have probably been able to
Yeah,
cope with the rapid, you know, it's just,
yeah.
so this is where I find myself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's hard to find a teacher in the FPMT that meditates, really meditates. I have to
Wow.
say. I mean, that might be wrong to say, but, you know, puts emphasis on that. I mean, I'm just being honest.
Sorry, could you say that again? I didn't hear.
Don't say it too loud.
Well, I'll say it another way.
Okay.
There's not a lot of emphasis on experiential learning
Ah.
at this point in time in this particular organization.
Okay.
There was. Lama Yeshe was all about that. But for whatever reason, it hasn't evolved
Yeah.
that way. And although Discovering Buddhism has a module on meditation, I believe, it's not tending to be what's emphasized or what's taught. You know, we get a lot of reading sadhanas and reading prayers, and even you go to retreat. How much time do we actually not do something at that retreat?
Yeah.
It was 100% verbal,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And and for me, you know, the verbal stuff is just pointing to something. And at some point you need to stop the verbalizing and experience. And that's actually why I'm not in retreat, because I just feel like it's really important to remember Lama Yeshe's tradition. Lama Yeshe was a great, great, great philosopher. I mean, he was one of the best debaters. You know, I mean, there's a story about one time he was all the Tibetan lamas were with His Holiness, all the Tibetan monks, you know, one of those big gatherings in Dharamsala, and they were doing some philosophical text, and the Dalai Lama had a question for people, and you know, there was something with this text, and somebody raised hands, it was this, somebody you know, all these different sayings, what they thought it was, and finally Lama Yeshe stood up and said, "The text is wrong." And that's what His Holiness was looking for.
There was a misprint in the text.
Yeah, something, you know,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
not.
there was
You
the
know the
word that was
story?
wrong, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so he knew the philosophy and was confident enough to say that that's what it was, you know. But yet when he taught, he didn't teach. But the thing is, a really great teacher, and I'm not that, you know, but at least I can try to show some of that. A really great teacher doesn't need words.
I can't have experienced that.
Yeah, a really great teacher, you just sit with them.
Yeah, yeah.
And you get the experience, and they might say 1 or 2 words.
Yeah.
And we just watched at Land of Joy, Introduction to Tantra from Lama Yeshe, and it's on YouTube. I really encourage you to watch it, because he doesn't say very much. And it's not quite the same, but he says a lot, you know, and Mingyur Rinpoche teaches like that too. And it's because there's, and I don't know how much you get from a YouTube, you know, but in his presence, he would say something and you would get what he was talking about, you know. And I try to say, you know, to convey what Lama taught, but I have to use more words, you know, because I was just looking, he would just say 1 or 2 words, you know, and you got what he meant, you know.
So I'm the spiritual program coordinator here now, so if anybody wants to give me input about how we can do it, I'm very much think that we should make that important, that we present Dharma that way as well. I mean, we are going to do the in-depth philosophical study for sure, but I really want to kind of, you know, hear what people say about ways that we can bring that experiential side in more.
Well,
We do a lot of the secular stuff, but yeah.
Can we have like days where we just meditate all day?
Yeah.
And because then you can fit that into your schedule. You don't have to
Yeah.
go away for 2
Yeah.
weeks. You can just turn up and then
Yeah.
just have
Yeah.
break them up, obviously.
It's so
Say
nice
less
energy.
therefore.
Actually, I sat next to you at Rabina's, and I am very sensitive to energies. And
it was just nice to be in your energy as a more experienced meditator, and, you know, and then to be in that community. That is a sangha, and that's, so for me, I was taking a little bit of somebody's very good practice as a little bit of an absorption way to inspire my own, and that's powerful.
Yeah, and I think if you want to develop a community here, you need to do something more than just read prayers. Because people want more than that. They want more than just let's read Lama Chopa and let's read this and let's read that, you know. You need to, I would take simple, like Lama Yeshe's sadhana, very simple. He would rewrite Chenrezig and Tara. And, you know, you just take refuge, like we were doing Waitara, you know, you just take refuge and then sit for 10 minutes. And then you can generate bodhicitta and just sit for 10 minutes. You know, if you want to incorporate it into a puja. Or if people want, you can just sit for half an hour and don't do anything. You know, and I think that's what that's what mindfulness, as far as I know. So maybe Lynn can do, well, she's doing it, so you have it here, you know.
We have it here for sure, yeah. I mean, what we call secular program.
Yeah.
A lot of it's just pure Buddhism, but we don't put that label on it.
Yeah, no,
and
you
a lot
don't
of
want
that is
to.
more experiential, for sure, yeah.
Like I connected with a lot of what you were saying last night.
Yeah.
And you know, you're here as part of our spiritual program.
Yeah.
But I first learned a lot of what you were talking about under the label mindfulness.
Right.
And you know, some people would say that's not Buddhism.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if we can make those connections that you were talking about last night, then whether we come at it through Buddhism, mindfulness, compassion, you know, they're all valid routes and they actually all interconnect.
Yeah, well actually mindfulness is Buddhism. That's where it came from.
Yeah.
There would be no mindfulness if there wasn't a Joseph Goldstein and those who went to Burma and Goenka and Christopher Titmuss and all those people as pioneers who brought the Vipassana tradition to the West, you know. And I know we're off topic, but this seems important, so.
I don't think it's off topic, actually.
And so,
right on topic.
I think that, and what I find, I mean, I've been in FPMT now for like 40 years, you know, and what I think is really missing is that basic foundation that people get from Vipassana practice, and I think the people that did that first have a heads up on those of us that just come in and read prayers, you know, and I think it's coming. I think that's probably why Lama Zopa is encouraging me and Renee and people who have a more meditative approach to be out there more, you know.
I did my first Vipassana retreat about 8 years after I started the Tibetan tradition, and that my experience, that was the first time I realised what meditation actually was.
Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting because it's the one thing I've missed within this tradition. It is meditation.
Yeah. And so we need to incorporate that, because the thing is, the richness of the philosophy and the richness of the Lam Rim and the Kriya Tantras and the highest Yoga Tantras, they are wonderful, but unless you have that basic foundation we were talking about last night, they don't come alive for you. At least most people. Yeah. Unless you have a strong past life, you know. It just kind of stays mental. And maybe the Tibetans don't realize that about us. You know, that we're just so intellectual that it just becomes another storyline instead of touching the heart. So how do we get it into the heart? And that's what I'm trying to work on, you know, is how do we bring it into an experience.
Maybe they get it in another way through that culture.
Yes. You know, and also maybe they're not quite as intellectual as we are, you know.
And just the environment that they live in.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that I felt about the environmental movement, and I'm not sure if it was before I became a Buddhist or right around the same time, was that really this whole environmental crisis is a spiritual crisis.
Of course.
Because, I mean, we were just talking last night about, Anne was introducing me to this thing about the lost words. Have you heard of it? I mean, it's just unbelievable that, to me anyway, that within the dictionaries of the, was it the secondary schools? I don't know what level of schools it is. But because there's so many, they can, I guess they have to have a limited amount of words in their dictionaries. And so whoever decides, they decided that, okay, we have to have all these technical terms because everybody needs to be techie now. So they took out words like heron and raven and willow and acorn and yes.
And I teach urban tree management to professionals, and that just horrified me
Yeah,
last
well,
night.
him too, you know, and me too. Just they're the things we love, you know. And so because he was so, it's Robert McFarlane, maybe you know, he's like some kind of British nature writer. He created a book about it, you know. And and it kind of ties in with this idea that I think that one of the reasons the world is going the way it is because of the urbanization of society, that we as human beings are more than just these intellectual, technical beings, that we have a spiritual body that's nourished by being in nature. And so when we're not in nature, it just makes us kind of neurotic. This is what this is what I thought as a teenager, you know, because I noticed, because I was an urbanite mostly as a child, but we had big parks, and I started realizing, wow, when I'm here, I feel so much better. And now it's a whole kind of therapy. Can you believe it? You can pay people to take you out in nature and get therapy for it. I mean, I know some people who are training now to be nature therapists. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. We have an urban farm in Leeds where they bring the kids who've never seen a cow or you know never seen a pig.
Yeah. And so I think that right in the crux of it, on a non-verbal level, is that why we're so needy and so unable to concentrate and relax, and why we're so much able to be duped by the advertising industry and all those people who tell us if we buy this and buy that, we'll feel better, because we don't feel good. There's something lacking, and it's not just love. I mean, I know we're lacking in love, but it's also a connection, not just to each other, because the urbanization has even more alienated us from family, and even in our generation, you know, at least I know in the US, people move all the time, so they're not even near, there's no more, what do they call it, you know, bigger family, extended families anymore. It's just this nuclear family. Now it's just down to one person and one parent. And so people are missing that nuclear family, but they're also missing this primordial human connection to place and animals and sun and stars and trees, and then there's something missing that causes us to be, I think, ever more able to just stare into screens, you know, and that's a big part of it, and I don't know what to do about that, but anyway, I feel like, and I think one of the books that I was fascinated by before I met the Dharma was, there's a philosopher named Gregory Bateson, who was at UC Santa Cruz. He was married to Margaret Mead, who was an anthropologist, and he wrote a book called Steps to an Ecology of Mind. And I bought the book just because of the title when I was a young ecologist and had some interest in Buddhism, because it's like, what does that mean, an ecology of mind? And when we talk about Buddha nature, you know, it's our natural state. It's our natural state to be relaxed and open and calm. And I think one of the reasons we're drawn to these Amazonian and shamanistic traditions is because they are connected to nature, and that's what we're missing.
Yeah, I mean, to be in the presence of my teachers, they don't say much, but they don't need to.
Yeah.
But they carry within their energy field the power of nature.
Yeah.
And they're all about, they say, like, you know, if we're going to get this world into a stable place, we need the brains of Europe, and we need the bronze of America, and we need the heart of their region.
Of indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
People who haven't been urbanized and lost. Because the heart, you know, our natural state of mind, what in Buddhism we call Buddha nature, naturally has heart. It's just who we are. We naturally have this open-hearted compassiousness, and as we get, and that gets trained out of us, you know, through all the traumas we go through, and the wars, and this isolation that we have. And so I felt like from a very early age that Buddha nature is just a natural state of being. And that's why when we're in nature, it's easier to connect with our Buddha nature, because that's our basic mind. And the more busy mind, you know, what I wouldn't call our Buddha nature, whatever we want to call it, I don't know what you call that mind, the distracted mind, you know, that mind is a fabricated state. And the more we get caught up in materialism and fabrication and ideas, the further and further away we get from our natural state, you know, which is nonverbal, totally connected, in the nature of love, non-conceptual, and completely nourishing. It's so nourishing. And just when you get a taste of it, it's like, you know, it's like, what is this big mind, this Buddha nature? And going back to the intellectualism of the Gelugpa tradition and everything, I think because it was an indigenous society, that they were born with that.
Right.
And so for them to add an intellectual thing on top of that, it was already kind of there.
So it's in balance.
It's balanced, but with us, you know, our grandparents lost it. You know, or maybe their great-grandparents, you know, when the Industrial Revolution, so that's what our great-grandparents lost it, you know. And even the mechanization of farming and the whole, and the Christian church made us lose it, I'm sorry to say. You know, because we killed all the witches, you know, and all the shamans, and because the Europeans had that, you know, and I know that Druidry is making a resurgence in the UK, because it's the Celtic connection. You know, you don't have to necessarily go to the Amazon; it's here, you know, to find those nature-connected traditions, and
They have this notion of sacred I can't say the word, you know, you give and you receive.
Yeah.
So
Reciprocity, yeah.
yeah.
So that's a really big part of these indigenous cultures,
Yes.
and I think that's one thing we'd really
Yeah,
miss.
and I think that's why the privileged urbanites, they get a chance to taste that, and why we like psychedelics when we were younger. Because that also, you know, you go into a park, and you just suddenly feel how connected you are to everything, you know, and it was so healing. And now they're actually, 40 years later, realizing that psychedelics are healing, and now they're actually legal in the United States. Not the kind of street acid, but the, you know, psychiatrists are now prescribing many doses of LSD for depression.
Really?
It's completely legal.
Microdosing.
Microdosing, because it makes you feel connected. So we weren't so off,
Yeah.
you know.
Big
I
one.
mean, I didn't do it a lot, but I did it enough to, I mean, Lama Zopa publicly said one time in a big crowd of people in California, he talked about the kindness of the drugs. Because if it weren't for the psychedelics, no one would have gone to India to find it. It's true.
Yeah.
You know, we have to thank the Beatles for that. You know, George Harrison brought this whole generation to start chanting Hare Krishna, you know. And it's another thing I'm going to say about Dharma too, and somebody can chime in, but you know, we're always told, you know, there's sectarianism within Tibetan Buddhism, but there's all this sectarianism, anti-Hinduism. But man, you read the Patanjali scriptures and you go to those places, is it really that different?
No.
It's not that different, you know. Is it any different? Is there that difference between the Samkhya school?
John could comment on that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we didn't even get to you yet. We got to start with. But I don't even, what's your name?
It's Roxanne.
Roxanne, that's right. So let's keep going. Somehow we're having a whole different discussion, but that's all right.
My name is John, and I'm born into a Christian family,
Yeah.
and for some time I felt that the thoughts or that is not resonating anymore with me.
Yeah.
Then I went into a bit of astrology.
Mm-hmm.
So there I realized there is something called as a rebirth and then karma.
Mm-hmm.
So that really attached me to that. And then I went into Gandhi astrology, where your whole life is inscribed on a piece of leaf.
Wow.
It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And many events happened exactly in line with that. So then I realized, and it was written by Agastya Muni.
Yeah,
That was from the lineage of gurus.
yeah.
So two philosophies which resonates with me is Buddhism and Hinduism. Then I went into a bit of healing. Then I realized that it really happens. So I really got interested into it, and then I was taken back because of some reason, I don't know. You know that I'm from a Christian family, a lot of family problems, a lot of problems at work, and that company is more into fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Maybe that also, I don't know for what reason, I had problems everywhere, and then I came out from there. But I'm still working with a company. I'm a mechanical engineer, so
Oh, wow.
I work with an organization which I'm not. Yes, they are into gas turbines with natural gas, but they are in a understanding way, not like the previous organization. So I think that they are more evolved.
Right.
I feel that organization is more evolved to have a bigger understanding. So I'm still with that organization, and I like to do services, but I don't know. I have family with 3 kids. I didn't look for population at that time. I was very self-centered and to have 3 kids at that time. Then I realized, a bit in a later sense, I realized that am I gone a bit overburdened to the nature now. So but happened is happened. It's my responsibility now. So
Some people don't have kids, so
yeah,
it's all right.
so it's balanced somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in short, I'm into. I love to do services and healing, but I don't know when my path will take me there. So,
Maybe here.
So yeah. So
I think we have a healing room here. Don't we have a room for healing here? Not yet?
Well, I have a room that I use for
Yeah.
my own business
Yeah.
and practice.
Yeah.
But I think coming back to what Adam was saying, you know, to have more space that everybody can use.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to
That
have
is the
one
plan
room for
when
healers.
the upstairs is
Yeah.
done, that some of these rooms will be
Yeah.
like for that purpose.
Yeah, you could have a massage table and one that people can
Yeah.
rent. And even if you came and did it a couple hours a week, it'd probably really make you feel good.
I was into reflexology and
Yeah.
did, I don't know, some
Yeah.
specific things happen
Yeah.
with their health issues. And
Yeah.
so there is something which is guiding me,
Yeah.
but since I'm not doing it for some time, I feel a bit depressed and feeling, am I really to that, or I
Yeah.
don't know, I'm a bit in a confused state at the moment, I would
Yeah,
say.
well, it's important to, if you're not doing things, when you don't do things and it makes you depressed, then you need to do them. It's like for me, if I'm not playing music, I get depressed. It's like, oh, well, I guess maybe I should be playing music, you know. Of course, I don't very much because I'm doing this, but still, you know, I think it's really, you know, we talked a bit about the old days, you know, a lot of us started out with Carlos Castaneda books, and he's always said, follow the path with heart. And so if you can even do that a little bit, you know, and in the meantime, you can be like Philip and work within your institution. I mean, really, that's where the bodhisattvas need to be, is in those companies, you know.
You could do stealth healing
Yeah.
in the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm a banker. I work in
Yeah.
the biggest bank in the UK.
Yeah.
I go into a room and I have the intention of sending out
Yeah.
compassion and
Yeah,
healing.
we all need to be undercover agents now,
Yeah.
be out there in the world, you know. I think it's so important. But it would be good to have a room that people could use here.
Yeah, that is the intention, yeah, we will do that.
And I think, you know, actually this discussion here is very helpful because this is a new center, and I think what's the most important thing is creating community. And if we just come here and listen to talks and don't talk amongst each other, how are we going to make a community? So it's important to come together and just talk about things and get to know each other, and I do this and I do this, so then when you come back, you have friends here. You know, I mean, we need Sangha, and the only way you make Sangha is by having somewhat structured environments where people get to know each other. Otherwise, you're shy, you're saying, well, I don't know that person, I'm not going to talk, I can't, you know. In a situation like this, you know, we can open up. find out, oh, he likes healing. Oh, great. Well, when we get our healing, he can come and,
Yeah.
you know, and you don't have to,
You can both
if
come.
you're feeling uncomfortable about it, you don't have to charge money, you know, you can just offer,
Yeah.
you know.
I did a lot of free healings, and that was my happiest moments of
Yeah,
life.
yeah,
I don't know why, but
yeah,
I think that is our
yeah.
real state of
It
mind.
is. And you heal. When you're giving healing, you receive healing, you know. There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
So because it's this world, everyone's so broken, I think it's really part of a Dharma center to have healing rooms where people can share whatever it is, you know, reflexology or body talk or some kind of massage or everybody's, you know, whatever, you know. And I think it's really important too to have just times when people listen to music and dance and just be themselves, and you know what I mean? It's just we can't make it to this. I have a friend, Julia Hanks, who talks about this disease called serious Buddhist syndrome. You know, I mean, we can't get, because
I'm taking notes.
yeah, because we you know, we're all just sitting and meditating. We don't even know what the person's name. You know, did you know it was Adam was his name?
I did actually know that.
Yeah.
I remember your name.
The last Mahamudra, yes, with Ravina, I was like the class fool kind of thing. So I was, and I don't mind either.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I know I talk more to everybody, but I just want to say, I'm not down on Christianity. I realize I said Christianity destroyed that, but you know, those teachings are just wonderful. You know, I mean, there's nothing like the New Testament. You know, I mean, they're just, it's a wonderful, wonderful
A
teaching.
lot of things has been falsified, to be frank.
Yes.
I really,
Yeah.
it's not resonating with me anymore, to
Yeah.
be frank. That
But the
teaching-
basic thing is good, you know.
But the thing is that when you are born into a Christian family, and from the day one onwards you have been teach some philosophies, and your kids are doing the same blunder again, and then your wife and whole family is against you and saying that you are wrong. I said, in which way? Can you just explain in any possible way that what I'm saying is wrong? I'm saying the very fundamentals of, the first thing was that forgiveness. Do you really practice forgiveness? Even the church father is staying in front of that. He's considered to be the incarnation or the energy of the God who is representing. He's saying that you didn't pay me that money, which I'm supposed to give donation to this church organization. How you know that you will die soon or not? You are postponing that. So
It's really
they become so money oriented and so self-centered. They're manipulating societies.
they miss the point, isn't it?
Yeah, really, they don't have any sense, to be frank. I was very angry towards this organization for some time, and yeah.
Christianity is one thing, that the church is sometimes is another.
Yes.
Exactly. You have to just separate them,
Yeah.
but a little bit Buddhism too.
I saw a BBC documentary just
Yeah.
on the web some time ago. I didn't actually see it broadcast, but it worked on the notion that Jesus Christ was a tulku. The three wise men were searching for him.
Yeah.
From the age of 14 to 29, which is a blank in the New Testament,
Yeah.
he was said to be in, I think, in Kashmir.
That's right.
And he was also said to be buried there because the crucifixion wasn't the final act.
That's right.
It was cut down early. But I sent this link to friends Peter and Harvey, you know. Peter came back and said, Lama Yeshe taught this, and he said that there was in fact a text that had some account of the life of Jesus in a monastery in Kashmir.
It was called Isa. Isa.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is a part of.
Yeah.
But you go back to the Middle East with it loaded down with Buddhist ideas, and you have an Old Testament environment.
Exactly.
How are you going to ever
Yeah.
teach that to the Eye for the Eye Brigade?
That's right.
So he did the best he could, and after
Yeah.
that, I believe it was manipulated for or it was changed for manipulation of power.
Exactly.
Apart from that, if you look at the Old Testament, there is Elia. Elia is the prophet, and he was reincarnated as John the Baptist for giving the baptism to Jesus Christ. So that information has been completely removed because the reincarnation is restated in that.
Yeah.
So it's same like Hinduism, Buddhism. So
Yeah.
it's all originated from that same seed,
Yeah.
and that was and it has been spread in every part of the world. And why that has been manipulated for their own advantage, because Romans took over
Exactly.
religion, Catholic as or the Christianity as their religion, and even said that until the 6th century the Christians were non-vegetarians.
And
Vegetarians.
And also believed
And
in
it has been-
reincarnation. I mean, that's
They
what they
were
found in
believing
the
in
ancient text, the
reincarnation.
Dhargamati text, you know, there's a lot of that there. No, it's very interesting history. There was a documentary a long time ago we watched at Vajrapani Institute, and it was about these, I can't remember what kind of Christians they were. I think they might have been, they had to have been Catholics, I think, because they found these, they went to Kashmir and found these proofs of this guy Isa and different texts where he was, and they thought they'd be enlightening to take them to the Vatican. Well, they took them to the Vatican, and the Vatican just, you know, just destroyed it all, you know. Didn't want anybody to know. So anyway, we don't need to, you know, spend time on that, but one thing is very interesting is that after studying Buddhism, especially teaching on emptiness, if you go back and read the book of John, it's all about emptiness. If you can turn the words around, you know, if you can like reinterpret the words, you know, because if you think of somebody who didn't really know what he was talking about and then wrote it down, so if you can kind of go back from that, you know, then you can actually see a lot of Dharma right in that.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting. So, well, where were we? We saw Lisa Garlic
On the front row.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm supposed to be working today, but a lot of what you said last night really resonated, so I've come back.
Hopefully we'll get into it.
That's dedication.
I'm in trouble with myself, but yeah, so much I could say just after what you said last night and what everyone said today. It's just super interesting.
Yeah.
So there's multiple things I do. I teach urban tree management to professionals, so arborists.
Yeah.
I'm an arborist myself, and I'm also a holistic naturopathic nutritionist. So I'm really as immersed in nature as I can be, except for the fact that I sit in the office most of the day now,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I'm trying to turn that round, and I have plans to set up a charity to rewild an area, but use that for health as well. But it's, a long-term project. But what I find interesting is, so you've mentioned something about people needing to be awake, to be aware of what they're doing to nature and the effects on the ecosystem of what they're doing. What I find interesting is that that's also true for people who work in nature. So they're not necessarily turned on to it.
How odd.
Yeah, it's
No, I know what you're
interesting.
talking about, because there's if it moves, spray it. If it doesn't move, spray it. Kill it.
So-
Yeah.
so
destroy it.
Chop
just-
it down, walk and talk.
Just
Yeah.
depersonalized it, isn't
It's
it?
completely depersonalized. And
Very people against nature dichotomy. Like, it's strange.
yeah, it is really interesting.
Yeah.
And teaching it, often my classes end up being quite philosophical because someone will say something. I don't suppose, is that true? Is that really true? And the class get really into it and they turn things on their heads. And but what I like about, well, there's lots of things I like about Buddhism, but from the things I've learned, I'd like to see an integration of some of those teachings into it, because there are a lot of mental health issues in even people who work in nature. There's a high level of depression.
There's just a lot of everybody.
It is
is
everywhere.
depression.
I just assumed people working in nature would be
I did too.
healthier, and
Yeah.
but I think the difference is whether they're awake or not. That's
Yeah,
the difference.
how interesting.
So I'm looking for ways to merge that a bit more. And you'd mentioned something as well about having more secular teachings. And I just wanted to mention a name. I'm sort of telling everybody about it at the minute, sorry. But Dr. Joe Dispenza, so I follow his teachings, and he's said,
Say it again.
Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, I just discovered him.
Oh,
so
it's incredible.
How do you spell it? I didn't. Write a
It's,
pen.
I can write it down for you.
Yeah.
Joe Dispenza, Dispenza.
Okay.
And so I've been dabbling in meditation for the last 15 years, you know, trying, oh yes, I meditate, but it's 10 minutes here and then nothing, and 20 minutes maybe if I'm lucky. And he comes, a lot of his teachings are really intense. It's a mix of quantum physics, heart-centered teachings, and awareness. Very interesting.
Oh, interesting.
And what I've found is just by learning this, a lot of that he talks about is very scientific, because he is a scientist as well. But a lot of what he says mirrors the teachings, the Buddhist teachings.
Of course it does, because it's the nature of mind.
Absolutely. But I've gone from dabbling
Yeah.
to, I started one of his courses in July, and I now meditate a minimum of an hour and a half a day.
Amazing.
And I love it. I wake up and I can't wait, and sometimes I can't wait to finish work and do it again. It's,
Yeah.
and he is spreading. So his retreats, he takes 1,000 people on his week-long meditation retreats,
Amazing.
and they sell out in 20 minutes.
Amazing.
So it is spreading out, and
Is
it's
he
completely
English?
secular. He's American.
Oh.
Yeah. And he's doing quite a bit on the healing side as well through meditation. It's really, really quite powerful.
Well, I think that's perfect, because it is, physics and Buddhism have been coming together for 40 years now, and if someone can actually do that, you know, because emptiness is physics. You know, that's all it is. It's just physics. You know, Buddha knew about that stuff a long, long, long time ago. That if you break matter down, you come into nothing. But it has energy. You know, it's not nothing. It's not nothing, but you can't find it when you try to look for it. But it is there. And I mean, that's what the physicists discovered about 35 years ago. You know, you break it down into quarks, and you break it down, and then you break it down, and geez.
Ends up as consciousness.
What?
It appears to end up as consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's where he takes it as well. That's where his
Yeah.
teachings.
Isn't
end
that
up.
interesting?
Yeah, it's super interesting. And when you were saying last night about, you're talking about feeling the space,
Yeah.
that kind of made me chuckle, because he does a lot of guided meditations, and the aim of it, the whole aim of it, he talks about space a lot, is to get you into
Yeah.
a space,
Yeah.
you know, an empty space.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting.
Well, because that's the closest thing we have conceptually to emptiness, is space. And so if we're trying to understand emptiness, well, actually you can't really try. Basically, to get an experience of emptiness is to not do anything, really. I mean, maybe he teaches like that, I don't know how he teaches, but the closest thing to it is space, because space pervades everything. And so when you begin to allow your mind to be spacious, then all you're left with is the energy of it. And then it just comes the same thing as physics, you know. Then suddenly you're understanding what Buddha said when his form is emptiness and emptiness is form. You know, there's spaciousness, and then but it has an energetic quality, and that coagulates, and then there's form. But within every form is that spaciousness. And so, and within every thought is that spaciousness. And within every feeling, every emotion is that spaciousness. And so, if we can just calm down enough, I don't know how he teaches you to calm down, but if you can just calm down enough, then it reveals itself to you. And so I think what I talked about last night and what I was planning to do today is just to try, not try, I don't like that word, but to share with you some methods of how you just calm down enough to be. You know, that's really all it is how we undo all the doing. And of course, you know, the tried and true method is, I don't know what he uses, but is watching your breath. But what I spoke about last night, and what I wanted to do this morning, I don't know where we are already. Oh, that's all right. I think this is good.
We're just still within this morning, yeah.
I think it's fine that we're creating, really, like I said, the most important thing for Jamyang right now is community. So I think this community building is important. And is that, what is it that stops us from being able to just relax and sit. And I don't know what he teaches, but because I've just been experimenting myself, trying to work on it on my own, you know, because it wasn't really taught to me, you know. But just, I said last night that, because I ended up doing these long retreats where it was just me and nobody, you know. I mean, I had a friend nearby that I didn't talk to, but at least I wasn't completely alone, but I didn't, you know, for years. I was just by myself, and it's like, okay, I'm not gonna make this work. And I just discovered when I was sitting by myself that it just wasn't easy to be with myself. And so that's why I feel that maybe Tibetans don't have this so much. Maybe that's why it's not talked about. And that's why I gave us the homework about what are the stories you tell about yourself. Because it's the stories that we tell about ourselves that make it uncomfortable to just sit and be with ourselves. And so there's a certain amount of healing that needs to be done about our self-image and our whole cultural, energetic, psychophysical environment, for lack of a better word, you know, that needs to be broken down for most people. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure there's some people who may have had like the total perfect childhood where their mothers love them and they don't have any self-doubt or self-hatred, but it's kind of hard to find. In England, just as much as it is in the US, maybe even more so in England, because I think for a lot of us older ones, I mean, they still beat the kids in school, you know. I mean, they beat the kids in my school too, you know. So we just shut down that very basic Buddha nature that I'm talking about. Gets shut down when we're about 2 years old. I'm going to give you something to cry about, right? You know, we weren't allowed to feel our feelings. And so what happened to all our feelings? I'm going to stuff them in my liver over here, you know, because I think one of the things that's been really helpful to me about the 60s revolution and the psychophysical therapies that came out of Wilhelm Reich and Alexander Lowen and these earlier psychologists that were healers is that emotions are in your body, your mind is in your body. I said that last night, that wherever there's blood, there's mind. The Tibetans know that. And so these concepts and these emotions, unless we release them, they don't go away because they have a physical energy in them. And those physical energies are still in our bodies. And I learned this before I got into Buddhism, actually, because I was a dancer and I was trying to liberate my body so I could dance. And so I had to learn into, oh, it's all this, it's emotional stuff, you know. Oh, it's not, you can't just force yourself to be a dancer. You know, I mean, some people can, but I couldn't, you know. And so you have, and I think it's something that's kind of missing from our education, is this thing about, okay, the Tibetans tell us we're just supposed to sit and watch our mind, you know. Well, why is it that we'd just rather read prayers? Because when we just sit there, it's not very comfortable. And so this thing about, very recently, it's the last 10 years, what this mindfulness-based self-compassion, whatever it's called, you know, about having to re-educate the inner environment. And I know one of the Nyingma teachers that I like is because I study with lots of different, I mean, my main teachers, of course, are, you know, Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe and Rinpoche and my group of teachers. But I've also gone afield to try to understand more, because the intellectual stuff just brings me so far, and then I'm done, you know. And we can get transmissions from them. I mean, Lama Zopa gives them all the time. But we have to be open to them. We have to be willing, we have to shut down the intellect long enough to put your notes down and just sit there and be with Rinpoche, and then you might feel it, you know.
Can I ask?
Yeah, you can interrupt. Anybody can interrupt any time.
Can I? Well, when I met Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I don't know if this is a transmission, because I've not been doing all that studying for all those years, but when I walked into the room, I was sat right at the back, and I could feel his compassion.
Yeah.
Is that a transmission?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I can remember, you know, being with Lama and being with Rinpoche, and suddenly my mind just went zoop into all this space. And I went, oh, you know, and the greatest, because I used to be, you know, I was a good student, I used to take all these notes down, but finally when I quit taking notes, it was like, oh. It's not about that, you know. Especially now they, you know, they tape everything, they video everything. You don't need to write anything down. You know, just sit there and be with them.
Something you never have time to watch the video afterwards, but...
Yeah. No, well, I never do either, but... I mean, but I still take a few notes now. You know, I just like the main sound bites that hit me, you know. But I don't, you know.
And you know, it's also can they do things in a jovial way? Is that a transmission as well?
Yeah,
Is that like laughing at you,
yeah,
but not really providing an explanation? You're just like, okay.
yeah.
But it kind of
Yeah, well,
Yes.
I was going to read you Talopa's teaching to Naropa, and what finally made Naropa, who is a super intellectual, this guru hit him on the head with a sandal, and that's when he finally got Mahamudra. So, you know, and I think part of it is too, we have to be willing to get out of our comfort zone, because we create comfort zones even though they're not comfortable.
Yeah, I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
I asked Geshe-Tashi to hit me 3 times on the forehead so I become enlightened. I just rolled on the floor and laughed. Yeah, it doesn't work sometimes.
No. Well, no, if you ask them to do it, they're going to do whatever you don't ask them to do.
But like going out your comfort zone in meditation, I wasn't prepared for the negative emotions to come up and be released, and nobody had sort of given me guide.
Yeah.
There's no guide for me on that, so it's
Yeah.
like, I feel like meditating now.
Yeah, well, maybe that's something we can work on here. You
I think
know?
that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
Is that you do go into a space where it's just not nice at all, and it's not who you think you are, and there is no help. There is no one that you can turn to and say, I've just seen all of this.
It's like Pandora's box, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, no, run away.
Well, that can't be
Yeah.
me. That's not who I think I am. And some meditations, I've just gone to really bad places, and
Yeah.
is it? And you don't know whether you use the word processing, whether that's just stuff being released or whether you have to pay attention to it, do something around it. But it's there, underlying stuff.
Yeah, and that's what has to come out.
Yeah, adding backwards was hard. I really
Yeah.
struggled on that retreat, and I did it all in silence, and I was losing the plot at times, I have to admit, but didn't
Yeah.
really know what was.
It'll be
what was
different next
happening.
year.
Will it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting a lot. It took me, I was unbalanced for a while after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But then eventually way better than I was before I went in, but it took a while
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
to
well,
navigate all that.
Yeah, well, there is a bit of time when I mean, Lama Zopa said one time, he said, you know, our mind is like a dirty cloth. And when you meditate, you know, you put, especially, I think he was talking about Vajrasattva practice, when you put a dirty cloth in the water to wash, the dirt has to come out. And it's not going to come out any other way. So maybe what we should do then, because I think we should take a break, is, because what I was trying to share at the White Tara retreat, you know, is that I think the most basic Vipassana, maybe that's what you do, I don't know anything about all these new things, you know, I just, but my idea of what mindful self-compassion would be creating that safe place inside of yourself. That's what I talked about last night, which is refuge, which is where when these things come up, even if they're so real, you know, there's a part of you that knows it's just a part of me that has to come out. And so you can just kind of watch it. And the main thing you want to do is not be carried away by it, but just let it come up, you know, and let it come up and just look at it. And remember compassion and remember love, and just, if you can, have two things going on in your mind at once. It's like you let it come up, but at the same time, with the breathing meditation, you're just kind of like showering it in this loving, compassionate space. Oh, and I was just about to talk about Chagdatuku. Chagdatuku he's the only Lama I ever heard this concept, and I really liked it a lot. We talk about, you know, we've all studied perfect human rebirth, that you have the leisure and endowments to practice the Dharma. But he said what we really need is inner leisure.
Is what?
Inner leisure.
Uh-huh.
Inner
Yeah.
leisure. And that's what I'm talking about, is the ability to be relaxed when we're not doing anything. Because we're going to have to be not doing anything to let that stuff come up. But at the same time, when we're not doing, when this stuff comes up, what are we going to do with it? And that's where, for me personally, I mean, because like I said, I just figured this out on my own because I was going to do that and go crazy because I was stuck by myself for 4 years, you know. And I had some good books and I had some good teachers and I had a refuge. And I think one of the things that's most important that I don't know if I experienced last night, and I'm jumping around a bit, so, but is this thing they talk about, devotion and refuge. And because there is, and I don't know how it works, and even I heard Lama Yeshe say on that tape, he does it, he said, I don't know how it works, but there's something about lineage and being connected and taking refuge that allows you to go into those dark spaces without getting lost, because you are connected. Like last night I said about Tara, you know, there is a connection. So when I talk about giving ourselves love, it's not just giving myself love, but knowing that someone else loves me. You know, I love you, Tara loves you, Lama Zopa loves you, and just kind of having that bit of groundedness when we go into a groundless state. Because emptiness is groundless. You feel like you're falling. It's scary, you know. And before you even get to there, you have to start uncovering these other things, you know, these other stuff. And that's really a big part of the purification process, is letting that stuff come out. And I'm not sure we'll ever get to our Buddha nature until we do. You know, because we have to be able to let it all enough come out so that we can see what's beneath it. And if it's so intense that you need to talk to somebody or have a therapist or something, that's great. And I know in Trungpa Rinpoche's organization, I really like it. They all have meditation buddies. It's a bit like the 12-step program, you know, you have a friend, whether it's a peer or when you go into the Dharmadhatu organization, it's very much more organized. You know, you have to sit for I don't know how many hours just breathing before you can move on to anything else. And you have a counselor that helps you. You know, someone who's been doing it longer. And yes.
No, I was just, I was really bewildered when I first kind of started in this tradition, because every book said you have to have a personal teacher who you can have one-to-one with. And I didn't see it anywhere.
No.
It wasn't happening.
No.
So I was kind of, for years, I'm kind of, it's all this stuff.
Yeah.
And you have to make sense of it by yourself. And I think, you know, that's another thing we should try and look at in the centre, to see if we can create a way to make that happen.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have older students to be there, even if they don't know the answer, just to know that, you know, I can talk to this person.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Especially as like for myself, you do become more clairvoyant. You do start to perceive other realities, and then you know, you need to.
Yeah. I remember when I first. Yeah, it's true.
I mean, I fortunately, I don't know. I do. I'm with a tradition, you know, on this sort of priest healer path that I have a context for that, understand it. But if I didn't have that, I don't think I've not met many people within this community that I could feel comfortable talking about that.
And so what happens is the real Dharma doesn't come alive, because we're all sitting in these little boxes trying to be self-contained, and when bad things happen we try to practice thought training, but we never talk about it to anybody, and so we just end up with more and more garbage. Instead of releasing it, instead of getting down to Buddha nature, we're getting more and more closed in, because we have to be good Buddhists and we can't say when somebody hurt us. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's wrong.
I'm so grateful to you for saying that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, just share a little bit of my experience. I mean, what drew me
Yeah.
into mindful self-compassion in the first place was that I was trying to meditate and I was dealing with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how can I deal with this stuff? And
Yeah.
I read about this course and I decided I wanted to do it. And I actually went to Wales to do it because
Yeah.
I couldn't find another one.
Yeah.
But it was really, really helpful and it unjammed a lot
Yeah.
of things for me.
Yeah.
And my progress has been much better since
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Because as you were saying, I've been able to identify what my blocks were and
Yeah.
learn to accept them and
Yeah.
work with them.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not saying that a mindful self-compassion course is the only way to do that. There's lots of ways to do
Yeah.
that. But I don't think, I've not heard before, someone who's come here as a nominally spiritual
Yeah.
teacher
Yeah.
actually say
Yeah.
those things. And if we can build that somehow into what
Yeah.
we do
Yeah.
as this community,
Yeah.
it's
really
going to
important.
create so many interconnections.
But then it'll be a
and
real
links to
Dharma
so many
community.
people.
And it'll last and it'll work because we have to be open and honest and be genuine about what's going on with ourselves. And I know that Buddhism says, all this thought training is really great, but that doesn't mean, that's kind of in the moment. I'm not going to get angry about somebody, but I need to, 5 days later, not angry anymore, go talk to them about it. Because we end up so insulated and trying to be good Buddhists, and the teachers are the same, Western teachers are the same. So that everybody's just getting more and more compounded in their own samsara and trying to be good, and it's just suffocating. And we end up with Dharma centers that are disharmonious because people don't know how to communicate. Because we're not supposed to say anything. Because we're supposed to, it's all in my mind, That's not how it works. It's not compassion, is it? So I'm so glad that Thupten Jumpa and these people started these self-compassion courses, and I was just fortunate I had a huge chunk of time to be by myself and discover that was the only way I was going to get through it, And I also had friends who sent me psychology books. They really helped me, So, yeah. So let's try to make it a real Dharma center.
Sure will.
Yeah, and another thing that's really good is nonviolent communication. Maybe how to learn to talk about problems. And not because it's true. It comes from my mind. It's true. I created the cause. It's true. It's not out there, right? But we aren't Buddhas yet. And we need to be able to work with it at the level where we are. And even though we know, it's a karma, or I created the cause for this or something, it doesn't mean we can't talk about it with the person we're having trouble with because they have something to learn too. And we need to be able to have discussions without it being the context of you did this. This is what I like about nonviolent communication, because it's all about my experience of you. It's not saying, you're like this, and that's why I can't get along with you. It's saying, my experience with you is like this, and it makes me feel like this. And so, I don't know what your experience is about it, but it'd be really helpful if we could talk about it, because there's no blame, it's putting it all on me. But I'm really uncomfortable with this, so I really need to talk about it, if that's okay with you, And
Very scary, because then you get to find out what the other person's really thinking, and that can be very challenging.
that's true.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, in the end, it always comes back to refuge. Because if we have, and the devotion thing, this thing about blessings, and I notice this in my own life. If I sit down and try to meditate, just kind of, okay, I'm going to calm my mind, it's kind of one thing. But when I remember the Guru, and when I remember the Gurus and the lineage and everything, immediately it's a far more powerful experience. So there is something to lineage and energetics and connecting with those lineages. And the thing is, I know I'm not trying to denigrate our we have these amazing lineages. It's just that we have to learn how to filter through our garbage and their garbage, because it's in their tradition as well, you know.
Sure.
Not them personally, but in their, we have to learn how to like just receive the pure blessing of Buddha nature, great compassion, you know, and it is there, you know, and I think that that's where faith and devotion comes in, because if we do, I keep looking at this picture of the car, you know, because if we do connect on that level and allow ourselves to experience non-verbally on that level, then there's a safety that comes, a safety net that does hold you when that stuff comes up. Does that make sense?
I think Dr. Cho would say that they've created potentials in the quantum field, and just knowing that those possibilities are available is comforting, and that you can access them as well. That
Well,
there are footprints already that are there and accessible.
Yeah, and I think the way I understand it, because I don't know anything about, but how I understand deities and gurus and stuff, is that there is that quantum field out there. And what we do when we supplicate the Lama is, I told you I think at the other retreat, it's like dialing to that radio station.
Yeah.
It's like those radio waves are out there. And when we take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we're like, I'm turning to 97.5 on the dial. But this is like, you know, this I'm tuning to, you know, like, you know, Lama's open, his guru, his guru, his guru, his guru. And maybe that's coming to me in the form of Green Tara, because I can relate to Green Tara. And personalities come and go. But I think that's one of the functions of the deity, is the deity remains. You know, the deity is constant throughout 2,500 years. It's the same quantum field of Green Tara that all, or whatever it is, I don't know how to say it in physics, you tell me in a minute, that all these, you know, this powerful lineage comes through, right?
Well, I just wonder now if that's because color has frequency, and I'd never really considered this before, but color has frequency, and you're talking about dialing into a frequency.
Yeah.
So maybe each of those colors actually represents an actual frequency.
Well, it
that we're
does.
tapping into in the
Well,
quantum
we're
field.
taught that. We were just working with all those colors in our last retreat.
I was supposed to go.
Yeah, what
we're
those,
actually working that time.
yeah, what those colors do.
Interesting.
But and that's why we have different deities and different colors, but it's still that same lineage. It'll still be those same, our Mahamudra lineage is a very powerful Mahamudra lineage.
And I remember you saying that every time we chant Om Mani Padme Hum, that we literally connect with everybody else on the planet, in the universe, who is also chanting that. And having, you can feel it sometimes, and then you aren't alone. There is this.
And that energy is what holds you.
Yeah.
You know, when you're crying.
Yes. She makes me cry all the time.
Well, you just
Sounds
need to
like a good
cry.
teacher.
It's just
It's just that you've got a lot of stuff you need to let out, you know. And you can cry. I mean, I have a friend who went off to do a 3-year retreat. She just cried the whole first year. You know, and it's okay. It's a big release, you know. So, yeah. Well, maybe we should meditate a little bit. Because it's almost, you know. Well, do you need a break?
Should we have a short break?
Yeah,
Five
let's
minutes
have a
to stretch
15-minute break.
yeah,
Come
yeah,
back, and then
then-
we'll just do a short meditation. But anyway, you know, it wasn't what we thought, but I thought it was good morning, you know. So,
Interesting.
yeah, let's dedicate, because this is it is an evolving community of Western Dharma, and it has to be authentic, not hiding anymore. You know? And hopefully Jamyang Leeds will become a safe place. You know, and not a place where, you know, where we can curb our criticism and speak in eyes and instead of use. You know, so let's dedicate to that. as we create spaces of inner acceptance and forgiveness and love, may we radiate that out and have a whole community of that, where people feel that when they come in the door. And then having that method, then we have the wisdom of the great spacious true reality to shine out and be experienced by all, where everything is pure. Okay, let's have a break.
If you want tea or anything, just let me know.
Oh, okay.
Whenever.
Oh, are you the tea man?
Yeah, I've been nominated.